This is our recording about text number 3, which is the teenage brain. The teenage brain is a scientific article, extremely interesting and targeted at the teenagers so that they would understand their behavior and the way that they think and act a lot better. The author is not exactly a story writer. She is a journalist by the name of Amanda Leigh Mascarelli. Amanda is a journalist, an award-winning journalist who works in a very prominent magazine. And this scientific article is depending on a lot of studies and a lot of research done at universities with the testimony of a lot of doctors at those universities and a lot of psychology doctors and psychologists. It's all about how the teenage brain works. The plot is about the same thing, which is the theme of the entire unit, which is growing up. What are the changes that we go through moving on from the phase of childhood into adolescence? And adolescence is the phase of being an adult, where you go through puberty physically and how your mind changes. So adolescence is about the change of the mind and the body. In this text, we will be focusing about the change of the mind. Amanda starts by speaking about how your decisions contribute and make the person that you become. Your everyday decisions make the person that you become. Every day you're faced with a lot of choices and you are almost always trapped in between, whether something that you just want to do it because you feel like it and something that you think that you shouldn't do. Maybe that's not a good idea. So either an impulsive tendency or a logical choice. And the ability to make a logical choice is new to a teenager. They're not used to making logical choices because they just grew up from being children. Basically, what makes a teenager's brain so complex is different than any other age group because a normal decision for an adult can be a very important decision for a teenager. An adult had gone through the experience before, but the teenager is experiencing it for the first time, and it's going to contribute to the person he will become. So an evolved teenager is about exploring and pushing limits. He wants to understand more about his surroundings, and he wants to understand what is it that he can do, what is it that he can't do. Basically, to understand who he is, what kind of character he is, what is it that he likes to be, and should he try to go for it. It's always a fight between the tendency and the logical choice. It's an exploratory period. You go through puberty, your body starts to change, your way of thinking starts to change, and you develop. Amanda spoke to Dr. Beatrice Luna. Dr. Luna is a developmental cognitive neuroscientist, which basically means that she is a doctor that studies how the brain and the nerves work to understand new things and develop as a person or an animal, to grow up. That is her specialty. She discusses an experiment that she's conducted with mice and said that the mice that tend to leave the nest or leave their moms, as they grow up and not to get too attached to their families, should live longer. So the correct choice for a teenager is that he should start to free himself from his family as he grows up. However, he should gather enough information into that step and by the consent and blessing of his parent. Teenagers all tend to want to leave the nest, and yet some of them can be onto a wrong decision because they have not gathered enough information and they did not get the blessing of their elders, which know more than they do. The right thing to do is to leave, however, it needs to be the right time. What goes on in the teenager's brain, they needed to take a look inside the brain, and what they did is what they used an MRI or a magnetic resonance imaging scanner so that they can scan the radio waves of the teenagers or the young volunteers who wanted to try and help Dr. Evelyn Crone, who is a psychologist at Leiden University. Dr. Crone here is our second doctor. Crone is not a doctor. Crone is a professor at the university. She is a psychologist. She is not a doctor, not like Luna. She conducted another experiment, giving the teenagers a game to play where they win things. And she started to see what goes on in their brain as they play the game on the MRI machine. What the experiment proved is that there is a tug of war, which is when one person grabs a rope, the other person grabs the other end of the rope, and they start pulling. That is called tug of war. At one side, there is the logical choice, and on the other side, there is the tendencies, the feelings. The part of the brain responsible for the dopamine or the hormone that makes us happy, which what the brain produced when the teenagers played and won at the game. The part of the brain, that part of the brain is called the ventral striatum. That part of the brain is responsible for releasing the dopamine hormone, which makes us happy, which is what we feel whenever we do something that makes us happy, like playing games, for example. And on the other end of the rope, there is another part of the brain, which is called the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain responsible for making the logical decisions. So the war between the ventral striatum and the prefrontal cortex is the war between tendencies, impulsive tendencies, and logical decisions. And that is what goes on in the teenager's brain, that everlasting war between those two parts of the brain, where the part which makes you happy and the part that makes you do the right decision. Like, for example, playing a game or studying for the exam. That is the tough decision that whenever you make contributes, whether you make right or wrong, contributes to the person that you are going to become. Contributes whether you will always or are more likely to make the right decision, which will make you a responsible adult, or you're used to making the wrong decision, which eventually would wind up for you not being a successful person. The Teenage Brain is an extremely useful text about understanding our own minds as teenagers and how do we develop. Why do we feel the same ways that we do? Why do we do the things that we do? That is exactly how the brain works. The war between the ventral striatum and the prefrontal cortex, the feelings, what I feel like doing, and doing the right thing. And whichever part you choose to feed will contribute to the person that you become. That was our Teenager's Brain recording.